The snow was falling heavy that Christmas Eve when Maya pushed open the door of the luxury cafe, her worn shoes leaving wet prints on the marble floor. The warmth hit her face like a blessing, and for a moment she just stood there, letting the heat seep into her frozen bones. Every table was taken except one, a corner booth where a man in an expensive suit sat alone, staring at an untouched coffee. She'd been walking for hours in the cold, her thin jacket soaked through, and her hands were shaking so badly she could barely grip the straps of her small backpack. This cafe was her last hope for warmth before the shelters closed their doors for the night, turning away anyone who arrived after 6 o'clock. It was already 5:45, and the nearest shelter was still 20 minutes away on foot. She approached slowly, clutching her backpack tighter, her heart pounding with each step. The other patrons glanced at her with expressions ranging from pity to disgust. A woman in furs whispered something to her companion, and they both looked away quickly. Maya was used to being invisible, but tonight the stares felt heavier somehow. Maybe it was Christmas Eve, when the contrast between those who had everything and those who had nothing became painfully visible. Maybe it was exhaustion. Maybe it was the small part of her that still remembered what it felt like to belong somewhere warm and safe. "Excuse me," her voice barely above a whisper as she reached his table. "Is this seat only for the rich?" The man looked up, his dark eyes meeting hers, and for a moment neither spoke. Maya noticed everything about him in that instant: the wedding ring on his finger, the expensive watch on his wrist, the way his jaw tightened as if he was holding back something painful. His suit was immaculate, probably worth more than she'd earned in 6 months before her world fell apart. But his eyes looked empty, haunted by something she recognized because she saw it in her own reflection every time she passed a store window. "I just need to sit for a few minutes," she continued, her voice stronger now despite her trembling. "I'll leave when you want me to. I promise I won't bother you or ask for anything else. Her voice cracked, "I just need to get warm before I walk to the shelter. It's so cold outside, and I've been walking since this morning." She expected him to call security like the manager at the restaurant 3 blocks away had done just yesterday. She expected him to tell her this was a private establishment, that she needed to leave, that people like her didn't belong in places like this. Instead, he gestured to the seat across from him without a word, and Maya felt something crack inside her chest, relief so powerful it almost brought her to her knees. As she sat down, trying to make herself as small as possible, trying not to drip too much water on the leather seat, he pushed his untouched coffee toward her. The cup was still steaming, and she could smell the rich aroma of expensive beans, nothing like the watered-down coffee from the convenience stores where she sometimes bought day-old pastries when she had spare change. "It's yours." His voice was rough, tired, carrying the weight of exhaustion that had nothing to do with physical labor. Maya wrapped her frozen fingers around the warm cup, and tears burned behind her eyes, not just from the kindness, but from the simple human acknowledgement that she existed, that she mattered, that she was worthy of warmth and coffee and a moment of peace. "Thank you," she managed, her throat tight with emotion. "You don't know what this means. I've been turned away from 7 places today. 7. Like being poor is contagious or something." He nodded, then turned back to the window, watching the snow fall on the decorated streets outside. But Maya noticed something. On the table beside his phone was a photograph in a leather frame, and in it, a young girl who couldn't have been more than 16 smiled back at the camera, wearing the same type of cheap jacket Maya had on. The girl had long dark hair and bright eyes full of hope and determination, and she was standing in front of what looked like a community kitchen, serving food to people who might have looked a lot like Maya did now. Maya sipped the coffee slowly, letting each warm swallow chase away a little more of the cold that had settled deep in her bones. She studied the man's profile as he stared out the window. There was something broken about him, something beyond the usual stress of corporate life. She'd learned to read people during her months on the streets. It was a survival skill. You learned quickly who might help and who might hurt, who saw you as human and who saw you as trash to be stepped over. This man, despite his obvious wealth, had the same look she'd seen on the faces of other people at the shelters, the look of someone who'd lost something irreplaceable. "You remind me of someone," he finally said, his voice cracking slightly, breaking the comfortable silence that had settled between them. Maya looked at the photo again and understood before he even spoke. "Your daughter?" she asked softly. He nodded slowly, and his hand moved to touch the frame with a gentleness that made Maya's heart ache. "Sarah. She'd be your age now. 19. The past tense hung heavy between them, filling the space with unspoken grief. Maya set down her coffee cup carefully, giving him time, giving him space to speak or stay silent, whatever he needed. 3 years ago, she ran away after we fought," he continued, his voice barely audible now. The cafe noise seemed to fade away. creating an intimate bubble around their corner booth. It was about her wanting to quit university to help at a homeless shelter full-time. I told her she was throwing her life away, that she didn't understand the real world, that charity was fine as a hobby but not as a life. He picked up the photo with trembling hands, and Maya saw a tear slide down his cheek, which he didn't bother to wipe away. I told her she was naive and foolish. I told her that helping people who didn't help themselves was pointless. I told her, his voice broke completely, I told her she was disappointing me, that I didn't raise her to waste her education on losers who'd made bad choices. Maya felt her own tears start to fall, both for this man's pain and for the recognition of how his daughter must have felt, misunderstood by someone she loved, judged for caring too much in a world that cared too little. 2 months later, the police came to my office, he continued, and Maya realized he needed to tell this story, needed to say these words to someone who might understand. Sarah had been volunteering at a shelter when the building caught fire. He paused, struggling with the words, and Maya reached across instinctively, placing her hand near his on the table, not touching, just close enough to offer comfort. She went back inside to save an elderly woman who'd gotten disoriented in the smoke, he continued, his voice steadier now, as if Maya's presence gave him strength. The firefighters told me she'd already helped 2 others get out safely. She could have stayed outside. She could have lived. But she heard someone calling for help, and she ran back in without hesitation. His fingers tightened around the photo frame. She saved 3 people before the ceiling collapsed. The elderly woman she went back for, Mrs. Patterson, survived. She came to see me a month after the funeral and told me that Sarah had wrapped her own jacket around her, had guided her through the smoke, had whispered, "Don't worry, everyone deserves to be saved." Those were my daughter's last words. Maya's tears fell freely now, splashing onto the table she'd been so careful not to stain. She understood something profound in that moment. This man wasn't sitting in this cafe by accident on Christmas Eve. He was here seeking something he'd lost, perhaps hoping to feel close to his daughter's memory, perhaps punishing himself by being alone while everyone else celebrated with family. "I spent years building an empire," he said, looking directly at Maya now with red-rimmed eyes. Sitting in boardrooms, closing deals worth millions, thinking success meant money and power and influence. I climbed every ladder, won every competition, made more money than 10 generations of my family could spend. My daughter understood what I didn't, that being rich means nothing if you're poor in humanity. That all the success in the world is worthless if you can't see the people right in front of you who need help. I'd give everything I own, every dollar in every account, every property, every investment. I'd give it all for 5 more minutes to tell her she was right. To tell her I was wrong. To tell her that her naive, foolish, beautiful heart was the smartest thing in our family. Maya's hand moved closer, finally touching his, and she squeezed gently. "She knew," Maya whispered, her voice thick with emotion but certain. "Trust me, she knew you loved her. Parents say things they don't mean when they're scared. I know because my parents and I fought too, the night before they died. I wanted to drop out of college to take care of my mom who was getting sick, and my dad said I was being dramatic, that I needed to focus on my future. We barely spoke for 3 days. Then the car accident happened, and those were almost the last words we ever shared. Almost." She paused, making sure he was listening. "But I knew, even in my anger and hurt, I knew they loved me. I knew they were scared of losing control, scared of things changing, scared of me making choices they didn't understand. Love and fear get tangled up sometimes, especially in families. Your daughter didn't run away from you. She ran toward what she believed in. That takes a parent who raised her to be brave, to stand up for her convictions, to care more about doing right than being comfortable. You gave her that strength, even if you didn't realize it." The CEO, whose name she'd learn later was James Chen, looked at this homeless girl who'd asked for nothing but a seat, who was now offering him the very comfort he'd been unable to find in 3 years of therapy, 3 years of charity donations made in Sarah's name, 3 years of sitting alone in cafes on Christmas Eve hoping to feel something other than emptiness. "What's your name?" he asked, his voice rough with emotion. "Maya Rodriguez. I was studying social work before my parents died in a car accident 8 months ago. No other family. I was an only child, and my grandparents passed when I was little. Lost our apartment because I couldn't prove income. Fell through every crack in the system I'd been studying to fix. Ironic, right? I knew all the resources, all the programs, all the applications to fill out, but when you're grieving and alone and terrified, even knowing what to do doesn't mean you can actually do it. The system I wanted to help improve swallowed me whole." She gave a bitter laugh, but there was no self-pity in it, just honest recognition of life's cruel ironies. James Chen studied her carefully, really looked at her, perhaps for the first time seeing past the worn clothes and unwashed hair to the intelligent, compassionate person underneath. He saw his daughter in her eyes, that same fire of wanting to help others despite having every reason to focus on her own survival. He made a decision in that moment that would change both their lives forever. The coffee shop across the street. I own it, he said, pulling out his phone with shaking hands. The whole building, actually. 5 stories. The second floor has been empty since Sarah died. I bought it 6 months before she passed because she wanted to turn it into a community center. Free meals, job training, counseling services, a warm place for people who needed it. We'd just started planning it when we had our fight. After she died, I couldn't bear to do anything with it. I couldn't touch a dream because finishing it without her felt like betrayal, but abandoning it felt worse. He pulled up photos on his phone, architectural drawings, Sarah's handwritten notes about what services to offer, sketches of how the space could be divided. Maya leaned forward, her coffee forgotten, her exhaustion forgotten, seeing in these plans the same dream she'd once had. She wanted a kitchen where people could learn to cook professionally, get food handler certificates, real job skills. A computer lab for resume writing and job applications. A shower facility because she knew how hard it is to get a job when you can't get clean. A mail service so people had an address for applications. She'd thought of everything. His voice filled with pride and pain intermingled. It's beautiful, Maya whispered, scrolling through the notes, seeing Sarah's personality shine through every detail. Here was a girl who truly understood what people needed because she'd taken time to listen, to see, to care. This could change lives. This could save lives. I need someone who understands both sides, James said, looking directly at Maya with sudden intensity. Someone who knows what it's like to need help and wants to give it. Someone who can honor Sarah's vision while bringing their own experience and ideas. I've spent 3 years being too paralyzed by grief to act, but sitting here with you, I feel something I haven't felt since she died, purpose. Maybe even a little bit of hope. He paused, then said the words that would alter Maya's trajectory completely. I can't bring Sarah back, but maybe together we can finish what she started. Will you help me? Maya stared at him, afraid to believe what she was hearing, afraid this was exhaustion-induced hallucination or some cruel joke the universe was playing. I'm homeless, she said bluntly. I haven't showered in 4 days. I have 63 cents in my pocket. My clothes are dirty, I probably smell, and I've been rejected from 3 job interviews because I don't have a permanent address. Why would you trust me with something this important? Why would you trust me at all? James smiled for the first time since she'd sat down, and it was sad and genuine and full of a father's eternal love channeled into new purpose.